All right, very good. So we're going to get started now. This is being recorded and it will be shared. So for those who come in late, not to worry, you won't miss anything. Thank you so much, everybody, all 105 of you so far joining as attendees, and the number keeps counting. We are really happy to kick off Uptima's series of fireside chats centered around military members making their way into their civilian life and career path forward, as well as supporting all the mil spouses out there with careers that are unique and also remote enabled. So, as your active military spouse is mobilizing around the world or the country, the Salesforce ecosystem is able to prop that up as well for you in terms of having that access to that consistency and solidarity in your career. So my name is Alex Bell. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at Uptima. I, like many of the other panelists here and those who are joining us as attendees, come to the Salesforce ecosystem with a unique background. So I am an accountant. I came to the Salesforce ecosystem as a revenue specialist. We're not necessarily here to talk about me, so more about Uptima. Uptima is a summit, or what we used to refer to as a platinum Salesforce partner. We're also a platinum partner of DocuSign. Uptima's, we are big allies to the military. About 40% of our workforce right now consists of veterans and military spouses. So we're so happy to be here helping individuals and really encouraging that diversity within our organization. What we want for all of you today is to be able to take away some skills and some tools and some new people in your network to help establish and make your way into the Salesforce ecosystem as your next step in your career. So the panelists that I'm joined by are Brie Hintze, who is she transitioned into the military, not out. So Brie is a mil spouse. Now she is located in Oklahoma City and has been mobilized around the country a couple of times. So you'll hear from her shortly. We also have Mish, who is Regional Vice President, Revenue Cloud at Salesforce. He's going to talk to us a little bit about his transition, from battlefield to cubicle. We also have Brion Schweers, who is Senior Vice President, Revenue Cloud at Salesforce. And one thing that I always say is so fascinating about Brion is how he made his way from being a helicopter mechanic in the military. And now when he walks around Dreamforce, he has like a fan club who literally stops him asking for selfies. So his story is super interesting. We also have Sawhney on the line. He's with Uptima. He is our Vice President of Customer Success. Again, another really unique and interesting story, and that's what we really want to bring to the table today, is a lot of this uniqueness and these stories and these transitions in and out of the military for you all. But AJ's roots, really coming out of the military, started in retail, and then he made his way to technology. So we'll hear a bit about his story there. And then Mike Perry, not from Salesforce or Uptima, from Paycor. He's the senior director over there of their billing product. He's a West Point grad, spent 6 years in active duty. So we're going to hear a lot about all of these people's stories and how they ended up in their current roles. And in terms of some of the skills and tools that we want you to be able to walk away with from today's session is really storyboarding your brand, right? So how do you create that story? How do you relate skills that you've earned in service and translate that into a career in technology? We'll also make people like myself available for some follow-on sessions if any of you are interested in any type of interview coaching, really kind of setting your story so that your introductions are interesting. We'll also make that time available to everyone as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over here. Oh, yeah, sorry, Brie, this is great. So one thing I will also say too before I hand over is just a couple of dates to save. So this is the first in Uptima's series of these fireside chats. You'll be able to access what we call the fire slides. So when Brie switches over to the next slide, you'll get a fire slide, which is a takeaway from today. But on January 12th, we're going to have a specific session on the military spouse. We'll move into March with PTSD and really working with trauma, right? So how do we move out of service into civilian life, coping and managing with some of the trauma that comes out of service? And then also working while serving. On May 11th, we'll go into working while serving. So this is like the toolkit for National Guard and reservist members. All right, Brie, let's roll forward here.
Yep. You bet.
Very good. So let's get going. And just before we start, thank you everybody for your service who is here, whether you're a milspouse, currently active, or you're a veteran. The gratitude that we feel as citizens of this great nation for all that you do for us, it cannot be articulated adequately. So thank you for your service, particularly as we head into Veterans Day tomorrow. Okay, so let's hand over to Lee Mish first. Lee.
Sure. So everybody, Lee Mish here. So like Alex said, Vice President of Sales here at Salesforce. Been in the tech space now for the last 10 years. I'm a 15-year veteran of the U.S. Army, both as an enlisted infantryman as well as a chief warrant officer for the Army Criminal Investigation Command, and I left the military in 2012.
Awesome. And Mike.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Like I said, I'm Mike. I served for 6 years after doing 4 years at West Point. I was an active duty Army officer. I served in infantry units as a platoon leader, executive officer. I was a mortar platoon leader, did a lot of fun stuff in Afghanistan. And then after I got home, I decided to make the transition out of the military into technology, an area that I knew nothing about. Started off doing tech sales, got into IT managed services, SaaS implementation, and now more in finance operations, doing a lot of quote to cash design work. So again, kind of stumbled into it and haven't looked back since. So happy to be here.
Fantastic. Brie.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you here. I'm Brie Hintze. I'm a military spouse. Been in supporting my Air Force husband now for 5 years, and it's been an interesting journey. I had a background in marketing, left my remote, my job at the time. Remote work wasn't an option, and I really was okay with that at the time. Supporting my husband, I knew what that meant, and I knew that it's quite possible I wouldn't be able to have professional ambitions while supporting him, and I was ready to take that on, and it was a fantastic opportunity to transition our family. But I was looking for something more as my family was growing and getting older, and I stumbled upon Salesforce Military and just jumped right in, having an opportunity to pursue something and challenge myself again and find this community of incredible people, all who work remote, allowed me to have a career. And as we've moved now, we just PCS'd actually a couple months ago. Getting to keep my career and my connections has been amazing. And I'm so excited to share that and help other military spouses with the same.
Awesome. Brion.
Hey, everybody, Brion Schweers. So as Alex mentioned, I was a helicopter mechanic in the Army. Recruiter convinced me that I'd get to be a pilot if I joined as a mechanic. So I did. And I never became a pilot, but that's okay. While I was in the service, I finished my bachelor's degree at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. And I have a degree in aircraft maintenance management, transitioned out of the military, working in that industry, and found out that I had some talent in tech, even though I never took a computer course. And here I am 35 years later as a vice president of product management. So
Fantastic. All right, AJ.
Yeah. So hey everyone, AJ Sawhney. I'm the VP of Customer Success here at Uptima. Like Alex said, pretty unique background. I came from 12 years of retail. I was 6 years in the Army National Guard, activated for a lot of it. I did some pretty fun stuff. I was a combatives instructor at Fort Dix in New Jersey. I did my final year deployed to Gitmo for a year, Guantanamo Bay. So I had a lot of time there to do some thinking about what I was going to do when I came out. Turned into tech, obviously. So I've been in tech for about 7 years, 6 years in the Salesforce ecosystem, and been at Uptima for about 2 years. So I'm going to be here.
Fantastic. So one thing I'd really like to talk about with you all today is how your skills that were earned in service, or Brie, from your civilian life that you tapped into and brought into your transition into military. I want to talk about some of those skills that you all learned and how you have made those translatable into your current life. And so, Lee, I want to focus on you a little bit because, you know, your story is, I think you went from combat in January to cubicle in June, right? So that is a really, really quick transition. So walk us through that a bit, and also help us understand how, you know, when you were making your foray into your career, how you really leveraged a lot of those translatable skills in your introduction. You know, you got that hook, you bought in with some interest from your audience.
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a couple things. First is, yes, absolutely. I left Kandahar, Afghanistan in December, January timeframe, and 6 months later, I found myself at Oracle selling software, something I never thought I'd ever do. And so, you know, I think there's a couple things. First is the transition happens quick, right? Like, as much as you can try to prepare for it, as much as you go through all the Army courses or military courses they give you to transition out of the military and retire and get all your paperwork, before you know it, it's there. And so you never really truly can prepare for it. But I think that's what prepared me the most for it, right? Is in the military, we're often told to go complete a task, and oftentimes we're not told how to do it, or we're not often given the resources to complete those tasks. And that was how my transition was, right? And so I think that for me, that was the biggest skill set that I had in the military, both as a enlisted infantryman as well as a warrant officer, is you kind of have to figure things out. And military folks are more equipped than I believe anybody to do that. And so when I found myself at Oracle selling software, which I didn't even know what software was. I didn't know what that term even meant. I had to figure it out. The story I often tell is my first day at Oracle, when my boss asked me for my forecast. And I literally told him like there's going to be 65 degrees out tomorrow. For those not in the sales world, like a forecast is what your business looks like for the upcoming quarters. I didn't even know what that meant. And so again, I think like the two biggest skills, one is just be able to figure things out. And second is just leadership, right? In the military, whether you're an E5 or a warrant officer or captain, right? Like, we're taught and we inherently are leaders. And that is very much appreciated and yearned for in the civilian world, right? They want leaders. They want people like us who are in the military, who have led in combat, who have led in garrison, who have just, we're natural leaders. Those are the two biggest skills.
Right. And there's also one thing that I really notice of those who have been in service and, you know, now particularly work at Uptima, like I mentioned, 40% of our workforce is represented by mil-spouse and veterans. But one thing that I really notice is there's a ritual to the day, right? So there is a schedule, a ritual, a list, an approach, this consistency and resilience and grit in the approach to day to day. And I think that's something I see very much in common with our service members and our veterans as they move over. Do you have any comments around that? Like, is there anything that you really take from the military and apply that to your day to day? There's a wake up time, there's a time for this, there's a time for that.
For sure, yeah. I mean, schedule is everything for me. I often say I'm not the smartest person in the room. I often don't know the most about what I'm doing, but my work ethic and my schedule is what's carried me in my short sales career. And it's what separated me from the rest, right? I have a ritual. I wake up, I work out. I'm working before everyone else is working, and usually I'm working after everyone else is. I work harder, and I'm more rigid in my work ethic than most.
Yeah, no, and I know from working directly with you that I can vouch that's very true. So Mike, I'd like to talk to you a little bit, right? So
right on.
Very prestigious West Point grad, spent 6 years in service. Now here you are in a billing space, right? So really around revenue operations and billing. What are some of the skills that you tapped into, during your military education, your service? How does that really translate to where you are today?
That's a great question. So I think, Lee, you kind of hit it on the head. Like it happens very fast, the transition. And, for me, one of the interview questions I often got, and this is a lot of different, this is not just the first transition out of the military, but one that I saw further down in my career was, a stigma in a way that said, hey, look, in the military, you have a manual for everything, right? We're a technology company. We're agile. We're fast. How can you adapt to that culture? And this is now 2 career moves into my career. And yet I still have that brand that I have to break out of, right? We talk about branding. And my response was, some of the effect of, we have manuals for everything in the military, but oftentimes the real landscape of what is going on the ground is very different. And you're having to execute very quickly on intent-based guidance. And while you do have TTPs and manuals, they're there more as guidelines, really. And then you have to otherwise figure out and get inventive and create a way to deliver on whatever you have to deliver in the military, be it planning for a range or, you're downrange in an overseas environment. And it's not going to be exactly like they taught you in the schoolhouse. So you have to rely on your tenured resources and ask and be humble enough to say, hey, how would you approach this? I know this is how I'm thinking about a particular problem. How would you go about solving it? In my role now, I do a lot of quote to cash design and architecture. I'm not an architect, right? I kind of stumbled into this role. So I have to be humble enough and know what I don't know, just as much as knowing what I do know, to be able to have the humility and grace to say, hey, I'm really struggling with this particular part of the problem. What do you think about it? And you source that feedback, and then that's how you kind of get beyond some of that approach. So I think doing that, especially as a lieutenant, coming into the military when it was during the surge in Afghanistan, I was that Terry Butterbar lieutenant that had to take over an infantry platoon that had already multiple deployments that were in the fall of Fallujah 1 and the fall of Fallujah 2, to be able to be humble enough to ask them and get feedback. And that's where, in my opinion, the real growth came from. And that's not just the lieutenant, but that's anyone coming up in the military. You have to lean on others to show you the way a bit. And I think that's probably been the key to my success in my civilian career after the military, for sure.
Yeah. I am honestly just so humbled. Like when you guys talk about this in real life, right? Your deployments to Afghanistan, being in Gitmo, like I genuinely am just so humbled by the tenacity and the grit and the resilience that takes. And it's so empowering to hear you relate all of that to your real life, right? So I don't mean to say that your military life isn't your real life. It's very real. But now as a civilian, and this is where you will exist until it's time for you to retire and move into the golden age of your life. Like it really is genuinely very humbling.
And I feel like the identity crisis is there too, right?
Yeah.
Like the imposter syndrome is very real, right? Whether you're 3 years out, you're about to come up on your transition, you're a month end transition, or 5, 20 years down the road. So that imposter syndrome is very real, even, to this day to some degree. So it's being able to absorb that and really leverage others to diagnose that and help, kind of shore up your self-perceived gaps, and being okay with pressing forward, even though there's tons of uncertainty is arguably, I would say, the hardest part about making the transition, even beyond that too. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I will tell you that service or not, the imposter syndrome is real across the board,
Yeah.
right? When we are tasked with doing things that we are uncomfortable with, the fake it till you make it, sink till you swim concept is true. And I think what you really take from service is just that, right? You have that grit, that tenacity. You're like, I have to do this until I get it right. Like I have been ordered to get this right.
Right.
AJ. So AJ and I work together day in and day out. We talk to each other several times a day. I'm really familiar with AJ's story. And so what I want to tap on, AJ, is one thing that I've heard you talk about a lot and that I see you practice every single day is the team, the mission, right? The team, the mission, the team, the mission. And this ties into what we were just talking about with Mike. What were your experiences around, the team, the mission, and carrying that into technology? And I genuinely believe, especially in professional services, what we do here at Uptima, the concept of team is everything. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so I think most of you can relate. When you're in the military, oftentimes you're thrust into a leadership type of role. Some may have never been leaders before, and next thing you know, you have people reporting to you, but also their lives depend on you, right? And it's when you're in the National Guard and you're not deployed, you're in a non-active environment. That even means things like keeping track of what their job status is, what their relationships at home are like, and you're in charge of these people's lives. So understanding exactly what Mike was talking about, what the bigger vision looks like, and then filling in those gaps with the people that you trust is a huge part of kind of that, it becomes natural to you. You can call it rallying the troops, but one of my most translatable skills for that in the real world or in the civilian world, was making sure that I'm running and that I'm making sure that the people behind me are running as well. And that's all it is.
No, that's awesome. And I have been in my role at Uptima, I'm very much involved in some of our projects in our delivery. And I often will say to the team, it's time to rally. It's time to rally the troops. Like, this is about the team, it's about the mission. That's fantastic, AJ. And the other thing that I want to talk to you a little bit about as well is, I see you approach your day-to-day with like this very practical, there's like this practicality and this peacefulness in the way that you approach your day-to-day. You almost have like a calming presence, which is somewhat opposite, right, of what we might see from a service member. There's an intensity involved in it, but you have somehow kind of branded yourself as this calmness in that storm. What did you learn in your time of service to be able to do that, right? Like there must have been something that you kind of picked up on and just really tethering to that calmness, that confidence.
Yeah, I think most who have been deployed or just, I mean, I can even remember this happening in basic training, right? You go through some really difficult things, and the only way you're going to get through them is if you immediately accept it and move on. That harping, that whining, that complaining isn't going to do anyone any good. And when you're around a lot of people for a long period of time, you see that complaining only drags them down as well. So I think I've inherently kept that. And with my teams is whatever happens, it's just a thing that happened. That's all it is. Other things are going to happen as well. Let's just keep moving on.
Yeah. And I will say that I do see that often, right? And a lot of our veterans, just kind of that calmness, Matt, I think he put it in the chat, the non-anxious presence, right? I do sense that a lot. So it is noted, right? It's noted, it's felt by your colleagues and much appreciated. Brion, so your path is very different than Lee and AJ's and Mike's. And the point of this panel is to really share those unique stories. And I know that your time in service was a lot longer ago than some of the other people here. But a lot of what we've just talked about, I see you doing in your day in and day out at your level, right? So it's this your level and your tenure out of service now. And so there's this steadfastness. It's kind of this glue, right? These skills and these tools that you earn and learn in your time in service, they stay with you forever. So now where you are today and looking back, tell us a little bit about what happens in your day-to-day, or maybe your week-to-week or month-to-month, where you're going back and tapping into some of those experiences you had when you were in service and how they help you approach, address, and solve the issues that you solve day in and day out.
Sure. So, it's interesting when I mentor folks through Veterati, I always talk about what I call superpowers. And my point is that we all have these sort of innate characteristics that we're born with, and we may or may not know these are our superpowers. And for me in the military, the Army sort of core values are honor, integrity, loyalty, respect, self-service, right? And these are things that just naturally connected with me in my military career, and they've stayed with me since. And I think we all have a place where we go when things get tough. We've got that, that inner sanctum, so to speak, right? And for me, it was these sort of core values. And I love that Salesforce, trust is a key core value at Salesforce. So it fits in for me. But I think the key is that I continue to operate around those values. And as a result, I've created a very large professional network. And it's built on trust and respect. And, we have to trust each other just like we do in the military. And they've served me well in cases where I've been in a position where you had to not, where you were expected not to be honest, or I just couldn't do it. So I always found myself where my superpowers, as I like to call them, either helped me excel in my career or were sort of a friction point against where I was. And it, in some ways, it helped me find the right path forward by sort of knowing sort of the to yourself be true, right? You've got to have that emotional intelligence and understand how you survived the military or military spouse life, and what are those strengths that you can use. And for all of us, they're different, but for all of them, they're incredibly valuable in whatever role you choose within tech or even outside of tech.
Yeah. And I will absolutely second the way that you have described that integrity, right? It's there's this very strong moral compass that is sensed and felt when you're at the table with Brion Schweers. And you were really committed to that. Like I have watched people, try to push you away from that, and you just come right back to it. You're very steadfast. So it creates this persona for you that is one that is widely respected. There's a ton of respect for who you are and what you bring to the table. And I love that part of your story. I love that the trust, the ethics, the morals, and how you bring that from your service experience. So we're going to talk to Brie here in a second. AJ, I know that you do need to run to hop on a flight. AJ is coming to join me and Lee. I'm in Boston today, and I'll be seeing Mr. Mish later this evening for a team building event. So again, the team, the mission. So AJ, feel free to drop off. Thank you so much again for your service and your time today. Your story is just so empowering. You're a wonderful human being. I'm so proud to call you my colleague, but most importantly, my friend.
Much appreciated. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, AJ.
So Brie, we've talked a lot about transitioning out of military, right? And how we have acquired and accumulated a lot of these skills and tools and, developing that sense of the team, the mission. And as a military spouse, you're genuinely part of a group who I consider to be the biggest ally to the military, right? You're often the person in the house who is really holding the fort down, doing a lot of solo parenting. And one thing that I have noticed of you is that I've been able to see you in a couple of different lights since knowing you in the last year and a half. So when I first met you, you were living in San Diego, you're stationed in San Diego, you were living on base, right? So you're a military spouse, leading our marketing efforts while dealing with a lot of the complications of living on base, right? And now I've watched you move off base in Oklahoma City. You've been able to build your dream home and really, have all of that from your career to be able to support, this new life that you guys are living. Talk to us a bit about what that was like for you and what you wish you knew then that you know now about coming to live on base with a service member, right? And being that ally and how different it is finding your way through your career, coming to Uptima. Talk to us a bit about that, because I think it's something that a lot of mil spouses underestimate, right? That transition to kind of like that in military life, living on a base, dealing with deployments, managing your career, your children. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. It's been such a ride. I'm a military spouse who got married before we joined the Air Force, so didn't know what I was signing up for. Sometimes there's several military spouses out there that marry an active duty member already, and that's a fantastic commitment and its own struggle. But with us, we joined the military. My husband became an officer in the Air Force, and we knew it was going to be an adventure. I was excited to support him as he served, but that was really all I knew at the beginning. So many wonderful opportunities to grow have come out of being a military spouse. Yes, there are some challenges and hiccups. I think everybody experiences that in life. Base housing, if anybody else here has lived in base housing, we can all attest to that. It's probably the most unloved building you will ever spend time in your life. And it's your choice to make it a place to love and still make it a place that you look forward to being at because of the people that occupy that space. Something I learned very early on that was extremely helpful for me was a mindset. And it's that we could choose to be happy wherever we are. It could be in the middle of nowhere if we're assigned on a random assignment. It feels like a random assignment, or we could be miserable if we got lucky and got sent to Hawaii. It's really our choice. Happiness is a choice, and it's a focus on what your long-term goals are and what really is a priority in life. And as a military spouse, I became very aware of how little the tangibles matter. You move, stuff breaks, it gets lost, it gets damaged, somebody gets deployed, things get missing. They call it the deployment curse. That's when everything goes wrong, and you're always alone when that happens. But you learn that the things don't matter. They're easy to replace. The people in your life are far more important and rewarding than any item alone can be. And you learn that you're far stronger than you ever realized you were, because you have to be. You could either choose to stay in your bed and choose to stay in a mindset of I'm feeling stuck, I'm feeling out of control. But you can always control your perspective, even though we don't know where we're living, how long we're going to be there, where we're headed next. That's the funnest question. I love people asking me, how long are you going to be here? And I say, I have no idea. Well, where are you headed? No idea. And they just, how do you handle that? And you get such clarity with, again, what matters. And if there's problems that you can solve, you focus on those. The problems about where I'm going to live when my husband's going to get deployed next, that's out of my hands. I can't worry about that. And that translates so well to working. I've loved the opportunity, shifting into the career part. I've loved the opportunity to get to challenge myself and find something for me to pursue. I've been so rewarded by supporting my husband and our family as we transitioned from becoming a military family and moving across bases, but choosing a career that you can pursue and challenge yourself. I almost want to encourage any military spouse listening. We're so eager to please and to be given the chance. Sometimes we don't even know that we have these goals and ambitions within ourselves because we're so used to supporting from the side. And that's okay. That's the hat that we wear, and we're okay with that. But you don't have to just accept something. So if you're chasing a role or a career, don't just accept something because it's a job to take. Really question yourself. What am I wanting? What do I see myself? What is a big, audacious goal I have for myself? Because if you can get that clarity, then there's a path. Then there's a path to get there, and you are in control of making that happen. I have a marketing career. I joined Salesforce military because it was an opportunity for a remote job, and I was thrilled to get to transition into a new career outlook. But something even better happened. I joined Uptima, and they saw me, I think, even more than I did at the time. I was eager for the chance. I think many military spouses feel that, of just eager for someone to take a chance on you. And I got to combine my Salesforce training with my marketing experience, and now I get to do marketing for a Salesforce partner. And it is just the most fulfilling experience. I think it helps. Employing military spouses will save marriages. It helps employ people in the military longer. If you have a happy family, if there is equal passion and support on both sides of that relationship, I know for a fact that it is helping that service member to serve longer and with a partner that feels just as fulfilled in that career. So I don't mean to sound cheesy when I say this truly has changed my life. And I know that meaningful employment will make such a difference for so many marriages and spouses out there as well.
Yeah. And, I will say that your addition to Uptima was so transformative for us. Just the way that we approach our marketing and go-to-market strategy. And I will tell you all that if you currently work in Salesforce or you want to work in the Salesforce ecosystem, one thing that needs to be on a bucket list is to head out to Dreamforce, right? Make it your mission to at least just go to one Dreamforce. Brie put together this year, our biggest Dreamforce endeavor to date, and it was just incredibly successful. And she was able to do this while moving, right? So they had to move from San Diego to Oklahoma City. She was also in the midst of building a house, and at the same time was launching Uptima's new website. And she did this as a mil spouse, right? So she did this not only being such an ally to her service husband, but also like having that flexibility to be remote. And I can't tell you how many times I've been working with Brie on something and her kids appear on camera, right? And so we spend a couple of minutes playing trivia or something fun, and then off they go to get a muffin or a donut. But the point is that as a mill spouse, there's such a tremendous opportunity, right? So you're doing all these things, especially for women. I think the statistic is, what is it, 95% of military spouses are women? Is that the
Pretty close.
statistic? Right. So you've got the parenting thing, you've got the home thing going on, and meanwhile, here you are being able to make a brand for yourself, create this career, and be a tremendous contributor to your home, right? And to your children. So it's fantastic. And, Brie, endless gratitude to you, and just that grit that you have in your day-to-day, pulling off a Dreamforce and a website, let alone moving and everything. It just absolutely tremendous. So we're going to wrap up here in a minute. If anyone has any questions that they want to pop into the chat really quickly. Right now, what I'm seeing is Brie is my hero. Well, me too, Jaleisha, me too.
Alex, there's a question from Carlos in the question and answer part, around branding. I have some thoughts on it. Mike, if you want to maybe go first, and I can.
Yeah, no. So that question Carlos asked, for those who you can't see, so obviously, thank you. You're welcome, Carlos. He's transitioning, right? And he's struggling with branding himself and finding the right fit with the right challenge. Obviously, salary is important, but it's more about finding a good next step that'll shape his career home, it sounds like. And oftentimes veterans struggle with branding, right? We talk a lot about it. Hey, brand yourself in a certain light. What I'll give you is some very specific steps you can take that I took as I was transitioning out of the military to prepare and help brand myself. What I first looked at was the role, the opportunity, or the function that I wanted to go into, right? Oftentimes, like at the time, I wanted to go into healthcare, right? And some technology, right? I was interested in consulting. So what I did was I audited both the soft skills required for that role and the hard skills required for that role. For instance, if it's, sales, right? Soft skills are going to be, you need to be very articulate. You need to be able to communicate a vision, understand customer problem, pain points. None of those things require an IT certification or a degree, right? But things that you can vet out, soft skills generally for that particular role or function. And the hard skills, if you need, like, let's say you're interested in data analytics, right? You can then go chase down things at Coursera, LinkedIn Learning. There's a number of different, very affordable, if not at no cost, veteran-enabled programs for developing your hard skills. Even though you won't be an expert coming out of those training sessions, putting that on your resume and telling the story about how you're interested in something and then you went after it and attacked it, you self-taught, self-trained, that is building your brand. It's demonstrating that your willingness to jump into that function, even though you don't know it, and learn those hard skills through just brute force in your own effort will shine a light on the interviewer or the hiring manager. An additional step I would take, I would look at veterans in that function, in that role, at that company you want to work, and call them. Reach out on LinkedIn first with a soft note saying, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm interested in X. I would love to hear more about your transition story. There is not a veteran on LinkedIn who does not want to tell their own success story if it means it's going to help another veteran. Tap into that resource. A year before my transition from the military, I was calling people 2 to 3 times a week. Random people I'd never met before. Reach out on LinkedIn, ask for 20 minutes of their time. I usually have 3 questions prepared that I prepared in advance. And then from those calls, I was able to understand things about how to better brand myself. What are things that I didn't think about in that particular function or role? And for me, I was looking at healthcare and technology. And by having these cold calls with people that worked at big healthcare institutions in areas that I wanted to live in personally, it actually further reinforced that I didn't want anything to do with healthcare management. I was talking to folks at DaVita and these other areas, and it kind of led me more toward technology. So without those calls, I may have made a jump into a career with less information and had a different experience getting out. And this is not something you just do one time in your transition. Think about it as you jump into that first role. How do you like it? What are your, how are your feelings about it? How are you performing in that role? And if you want to make a change, do the exact same process. So again, reach out to folks on LinkedIn, go to that 20-minute request for a call with that cold call email. I have a template I can obviously share with folks as needed. I do this a lot when I mentor veterans one-on-one, and then audit the soft and hard skills, and then frame your work from the military into how it naturally fits through the use of stories that articulate you taking a job probably in the military that you didn't know how to do before, that you had to learn on the job, that you had to go out and seek education on your own dollar to go understand it better. So all of those things are very actionable steps that I just wanted to share out here, because sometimes branding is a very can be very nebulous discussion, or how to go about doing it. Those are very specific steps that I took that helped me tremendously in picking my next role in my career. So
Mike, if I could just maybe add 10 seconds worth of just additional branding.
yeah, please.
Like once you get that job, I feel like veterans really struggle with, now I'm a civilian, now I'm in the workforce. How do I brand myself now? And there's two schools of thought. The first is like, put my military experience behind me. I'm a civilian now. It's not who I am today. Me personally, I've taken the approach of, that's absolutely who I am and how I got to where I am today. And I embrace my military service. It's about who I am. You can see behind me, I have plaques and pictures of my military service. I talk about it with my customers. I talk about it with internal employees. I've made it, it's my brand. My military service is my brand. But you got to make that decision, right? Early on in your career, your post-military career, what is that brand going to be? Is it your military service or is it not? Stick with it, embrace it, and love it.
I think that your military service becomes such a big part of who you are as a person, right? For many people, when they're entering service, they're entering in these very impressionable years of their lives, right? So typical service is like 18 to 22. That becomes part of what your identity is as an adult. And my recommendation in that branding is to not diminish the importance of that. When you're interviewing with people like me or a lot of the other hiring managers at Uptima, we value that as part of your story. And I think that's directly correlated to the fact that 40% of our workforce is represented by milspouse and veterans. So I would always recommend finding a way to tie your time in service to your introduction, your brand, and what that means for the organization and what you have to offer them there, because again, it is such a big part of who you are. Lastly, when we are branding ourselves, what we don't want to try and do is force a square peg into a round hole, right? Being genuine in your approach, and that what Brion talked about, that trust, that honesty, that integrity. When you're trying to be something you're not, or diminish a part of your life that was so impactful and meaningful and has so much to take from it, your audience will pick up on that. Your audience is going to pick up on, hey, there's something amiss here. So I say celebrate it, own it, come forward with something that's very genuine. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, I am available, if anyone wants to schedule 20 minutes with me to run through some interviewing tips and just that storytelling and how you approach sharing those experiences and tying them into what we do. Brie will share my LinkedIn here. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to provide some time in terms of mentoring folks moving from their service life into their civilian life, and from the perspective of that interviewing process.
Yeah, and Alex, just real quick, I think the thing you said that's real important is you've got to connect it, make it relevant. Your military experience matters. It's not just that you were in the military, but the things you did and learned are 100% relevant to what we do in the civilian world, especially, in my experience in tech, the team, the mission, right, the tasks, it's all there. So understand how what you did, who you are, aligns with what the hiring manager is looking for, and help them connect those dots and be relevant.
I agree. And I will tell you all that I work with Brion regularly. I'm on customer calls with him regularly. I hear Brion introducing himself. And never does he leave out his time in service. Brion doesn't leave that out, right? It's always part of his story. And the reason why I'm calling Brion's name on this is because, again, of the people that are here, Brion's been out of service the longest of anybody here, and it's still a story for him, right? We're tying this in, we're making it relevant. What does that mean to what he does today? So yeah, I totally agree. Lee, I'm with you. I love that you wear that badge loud and proud. It's truly one of the reasons why I love working with you so much. I respect incredibly your time and service, and I watch you personify that time of your life and what you do in your day to day. Like, you are the grittiest, just most straightforward, practical person I think I work with at Salesforce in that way. And I have infinite respect for it. So I love that you wear it as a badge of honor, and so you should, right? And what you did was amazing. And what you continue to do continues to be amazing. Very good. All right, so to the fire slide. All right, so some takeaways here, like we talked about at the beginning of the call today, or the webinar today, was what we want you to do is walk away with some tools, some skills, some resources, and we will be evolving these conversations in those save the dates. So Brie will make sure everybody has those. So big takeaway here is you can never have a second impression, right? So it's mastering your story. It's that introduction. Come to this with your heart, put your heart into it. And all of your experience matters. And I do hope that's what you take from hearing all of these individual stories. You don't have to be a software developer to work in Salesforce, right? It's not just about the code. It's not just about the config. That's a big piece of it, don't get me wrong, but that's not always what it's about. Tying into all of the paths that there are in tech, I will tell you, I don't have a service background. I'm definitely an ally to our military, but I don't come to the Salesforce ecosystem with any ability to code or config the system. In fact, I would tell you that I'm the last individual you would want to staff on a project doing any of those things. I think it would probably go quite poorly. So it's that path in tech, right? There's a lot of functional type roles, a lot of technical type roles. It's really, what's your interest? Is it marketing? Is it business architecture, solution architecture, sales, business development? So what's really interesting to you? And what I will tell you, and I think everybody can agree with me here, is that your path isn't going to be this straight line. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs. Many of us will tell you that we really don't know entirely how we ended up in the roles that we're in. But all roads lead to where we are. So you eventually get there, and it does require some patience and resilience and grit. And I think what we've heard that's common across the board is leveraging that from your time in service, that resiliency, the grit, just the mission. What is your mission? Resources that we love. So we're partnered closely with Veterati, Merivis, Vets to PM, Hiring Our Heroes, Salesforce Military, Salesforce Alliance. And so make sure that you are tapping into these resources. There's a phenomenal network to tap into there. That was what Mike was really talking about when he mentioned, what he did to make that transition. You'll often hear the phrase, it's a lot about who you know, right? So the more introductions you can make, the more you can tap into these networks and build your brand and your network that way, the better off you will be. You just never know where an opportunity lies. Always be open to the conversation, encourage the conversation, and then connect with us on LinkedIn. So we talked a bit about interviewing practice, defining brand, connecting your dots, that accountability. One thing I loved that Brie said in the chat was, find a project nobody wants to do and do it well. Right? That's a wonderful way to build your brand and build your network. All right, so we are over time, but we're so happy to have spent the time with all of you. Brie will make sure that these artifacts are available to you all, for our veterans, our active duty members, our military spouses, and to all of the panelists today. Thank you for your service. I've said it a number of times on this call. I don't think I could ever say it enough. Whenever I see an active duty member in an airport, I always stop to say thank you for your service. I'm just so incredibly grateful for the things that you all do, and hearing your stories is just so humbling. All right, everybody, enjoy Veterans Day tomorrow, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you. You
Thanks,
will be
everyone.
getting a link after this with an anonymous survey. We'd love to hear what would be meaningful, what's valuable, what's something you're struggling with right now. You don't have to put your name on it. It doesn't have to be anything attached to you, but we want this to be valuable for you. So please take a second and let us know. And we will definitely be catering our future conversations towards those answers.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.